In 1 Corinthians 5:7, the Apostle Paul writes, "For Christ, our Passover Lamb, has been sacrificed." What in the world did Paul mean when he penned these words? In many ways, if you go back to the middle of the second millennium before Christ, Egypt was the epicenter of the world. It was one of the predominant cultures in that time. It was a powerful country and nation. And the king there, the Pharaoh, had a huge building operation that was under works. He wanted to build the infrastructure of the nation because he realized that that was an important way to be able to galvanize the nation, to make it stronger. And so he had actually enslaved the Hebrew people, the Israelites, hundreds of years before. In fact, it was his predecessors who had done this. And on the backs of these Hebrews, the Egyptian leader was building an empire. I want you to think about those Hebrew people so long ago and what was going through their mind, what they were experiencing, how they felt. They were overwhelmed and stressed and tired and even scared. And it wasn't just because they had to experience the heat of the day every single day. After all, they lived in a desert. Because at night, the desert air becomes cool. That wasn't the source of their stress. It wasn't just because of the hard work that they had to labor and do every single day. They had to build bricks primarily, to build buildings for the Pharaoh's building operation. And every single week, every single year, it seemed like the standards got higher and higher. More had to be accomplished in less time. And so the Hebrew people would have been overwhelmed. But that wasn't the primary source of their stress and worry at this time. No, at this specific time in history, the Hebrew people were under stress and worried and even downright scared because, well, God had sent this man named Moses into Egypt with a message from God to let the Hebrew people go. And Pharaoh wasn't having anything to do with it. And so God showed day after day, many days upon days, his power in all kinds of miraculous acts. He sent insects and bugs, frogs. He turned the river Nile into blood. He caused all kinds of tribulations to fall upon the Egyptian nation. And every time it seemed like King Pharaoh would relent, but he never did. He kept on saying he would let the people go, but he refused to do so. Each of these 9 miraculous acts of God took place specifically on the nation of Egypt, the people of Egypt. The Hebrew people were exempt. But now their leader was telling them that there was a 10th and a final tribulation to experience. And this one would involve them as well. The instructions were simple, though you can imagine the Hebrew people were concerned. Really? Could the life of an animal take the place of human life? God promised that he was going to send a huge judgment upon everyone in Egypt, Egyptian and Hebrew alike. Even the animals weren't exempt. And what God was going to do was to snuff out the life of the firstborn of every living thing in Egypt. But the Hebrew people could be exempt. And the way they would be exempt from losing their firstborn was to take a lamb, a 1-year-old male, and they were to gather it and bring it to their homes. And for 4 days they were to observe the lamb because it had to be perfect. No maimed or sick or damaged animals were allowed to be slaughtered in the place of the firstborn. It had to be a perfect lamb. And so for 4 days, the Hebrew people examined this animal to make sure that it was perfect. And then on that 4th day, the animal was slain. And the blood was to be applied on the doorposts and above the door frame. And when the angel of death came into Egypt to take the life of the firstborn of every living thing, those who had slaughtered the lamb and placed the blood on the doorposts, well, they wouldn't experience death because the animal had taken their place. Can you imagine the feeling that night as you were told not to leave your home after placing blood on the doorposts and trusting that your leader had heard correctly from God that he would protect your firstborn? That night there was a lot of wailing, a lot of crying in the nation of Egypt because so many lives were taken of the Egyptians and their livestock. But for the Hebrew people, well, they had been protected. And in the middle of the night, the Pharaoh summoned Moses, the leader of the nation, and said, "Get your people out of here. I am through with you. I can't have any more of this." As you probably know, this celebration, this solemn time, was called the Passover. And the lamb that was slaughtered was known as the Passover Lamb. This was a historical event that took place in Egypt, but was to be reenacted every single year by the Jewish people forever. I don't know about you, but as I've read over the original Passover event found in the book of Exodus many, many times, I've often thought that, the Hebrew people were these oppressed, enslaved folks. And they were the victims of what was taking place in Egypt. And in many ways, this is true. But we also know that the Hebrew people weren't perfect either, and that they had a major problem. Their problem was sin. There's a rather obscure passage in the Bible that describes very clearly what the Hebrew people were up to at the time of this original Passover. It's found in the prophetic book of Ezekiel in the 20th chapter in verses 1 through 10. And it describes the situation of the Hebrew people in Egypt. Close your eyes and imagine this situation. Just listen to these words spoken by the prophet Ezekiel so long ago. "In the 7th year, in the 5th month, on the 10th day, some of the elders of Israel came to inquire of the Lord, and they sat down in front of me. Then the word of the Lord came to me, 'Son of man, Ezekiel, speak to the elders of Israel and say to them, this is what the sovereign Lord says. Have you come to inquire of me? As surely as I live, I will not let you inquire of me, declares the sovereign Lord. Will you judge them? Will you judge them, Son of man? Then confront them with the detestable practices of their fathers and say to them, this is what the sovereign Lord says. On the day I chose Israel, I swore with uplifted hand to the descendants of the house of Jacob and revealed myself to them in Egypt. With uplifted hand, I said to them, I am the Lord your God. On that day I swore to them that I would bring them out of Egypt into a land I had searched out for them, a land flowing with milk and honey, the most beautiful of all lands. And I said to them, each of you get rid of the vile images you have set your eyes on, and do not defile yourselves with the idols of Egypt. I am the Lord your God. But They rebelled against me and would not listen to me. They did not get rid of the vile images they had set their eyes on, nor did they forsake the idols of Egypt. So I said I would pour out my wrath on them and spend my anger against them in Egypt. But for the sake of my name, I did what would keep it from being profaned in the eyes of the nations they lived among, and in whose sight I had revealed myself to the Israelites by bringing them out of Egypt. Therefore, I led them out of Egypt and brought them into the desert. I gave them my decrees and made known to them my laws, for the man who obeys them will live by them. Did you catch what Ezekiel says here in this passage? He's speaking in modern times at that time to the Israelite nation as it's experiencing exile. Many, many hundreds of years have passed since the original Passover, and yet God is still bringing up what the people of Israel were like in Egypt. They were into idolatry and worshiping false gods. And just like that, the little bubble by which we see the Israelite people in Egypt as oppressed and enslaved and pure victims goes by the wayside, and we see that they are sinners too. There is one distinction in the 10th plague, the Passover, the death of the firstborn of every living thing, that makes Israel different from the Egyptian people. And that is that blood was shed in their place by the Passover Lamb. And not only that, the blood had to be applied to the doorposts of a person's house for them to be exempt from this death. For as the Bible says, written much later, but it's always been true, for all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. For hundreds of years, the nation of Israel would sacrifice lambs on Passover, first in the vicinity of the tabernacle as they wandered in the wilderness, and later at the temple as it was located in Jerusalem. And such was the case when Jesus walked the earth during his public earthly ministry. Last Sunday we talked about Palm Sunday, the triumphal entry, as Jesus rode into Jerusalem on a donkey. It's not coincidental that Jesus came to Jerusalem at such a time. He rode into town on that donkey and began to be examined by the people. It was to be a 4-day examination period that would culminate with the Last Supper on Thursday, a private event with just Jesus and his 12 followers. And then, soon thereafter, his arrest and trial and crucifixion on Friday. Jesus' time of death perfectly correlated with the time that the Passover lambs would have been slaughtered. This is not coincidental. The fact that this is the case indicates on a very deep level God's coordination of history in general and salvation history in particular. When Jesus hung on the cross, he begged God the Father to forgive those who were persecuting him even then. He also said that it is finished. And what did he mean by this? Well, you might have been wondering as we were talking about the original Passover, how in the world is it that an animal can take away the sins of a person? Well, the answer is if you look in the New Testament book of Hebrews, a book I've been examining my own personal quiet time over the last couple of months. The answer is an animal can't. It's only a temporary resolution to the sin problem. But Jesus Christ was truly perfect in every way. See, every animal is actually blemished. There's a flaw if you look deep enough in every single animal and in every single human being, except for Jesus Christ. And because he was perfect in every way and had been tried and tested as a human being, yet fully God, he was the perfect sacrifice as the Passover Lamb. And he is the only way that we can be right with God and our sins forgiven. You know, it's interesting because the parallels between the first Passover and the subsequent hundreds of Passovers that took place before Jesus' public earthly ministry, right up until the Passover feast that Jesus took part in, that culminated in his arrest and crucifixion, all of them point to the fact that we are called to do something significant. God has already done the most important thing of all. He has shed blood. He has made a way for the atonement of sin, for our sins to be washed away, for us to be right with him. But just like a lamb could be slaughtered and the blood not applied to the doorposts of the house, and thus the firstborn would have been killed, so too, just because Jesus died and was raised from the dead doesn't mean that we are automatically saved. We have to respond to that blood being shed. And we respond by receiving, through faith, by God's grace, Jesus Christ into our life. Whether you've already made that decision or not, I hope that you spend some time this Good Friday reflecting on what God has sacrificed so that you can be right with him. I hope that you consider the melding together of God's justice, because death is required when sin takes place, but also his mercy and grace by allowing Jesus to stand in our place. That was true for the first Passover in its imperfect form as an animal was sacrificed, and seen in all of its completion and perfection in Jesus when he died. My friends, I pray that you would consider the claims of Jesus Christ. The coordination that God made happen so that we could understand what truly took place through Jesus' perfect life and through his death on the cross. And I pray, whether you've already become a follower of Jesus Christ or you're contemplating becoming one, that you would fall on your knees and throw yourself into the open arms of a loving God who wants you to be saved. But it requires a response. Accepting Jesus for who he is and accepting the sacrifice he made on our behalf. We started with Paul's words in 1 Corinthians 5. So let's go back to them. For Christ, our Passover Lamb, has been sacrificed. It may come as a surprise that Paul is actually discussing this topic in the midst of addressing an issue related to morality, the way that people live. See, there was a lot of sin in the church in Corinth, and Paul was calling that out. And he was saying, we've already had a Passover lamb that has been sacrificed. And because of that, not only are you set free from sin, you are called to live holy lives. Good Friday is not just about thinking about the sacrifice that God made through Jesus Christ. It is also a call to turn to holiness, to purity, to doing what is right as God says it is right, not in the court of public opinion. I pray that today you would not only embrace Jesus Christ, but you would also embrace the way of Jesus Christ. That your life would be marked with love and forgiveness and joy and hope and peace. May you know Jesus Christ as you never have before. may it be so. Amen.